Lindsay, we're seeing a sharp decline in total apprehensions.
375 immigration judges to judge whether or not someone can come or not come and be fair about it. My friends on the other side have done nothing with that. Over and over, I've asked for resources to step up action at the border.
This after the state seized control of the park to arrest migrants.
And by the way, I've worked with China and Mexico to slow the flow of fentanyl in the United States. As I speak, it's way down. Folks, we're making real progress. One of the most important issues we're facing.
From Congress since the 90s. The future of the deal does have some speculating.
Supreme Court decision. All right, picture this. Razor wire stretching along the U.S.-Mexico border like some scene out of an action movie. The Supreme Court just gave the green light for some temporary wire removal. So here's the deal. The Supreme Court has said, okay, you can take down the razor wire, but only if it's absolutely necessary. This isn't some permanent makeover for the border. It's more like a quick fix while they figure things out. Now, why all the fuss? Well, it all started with Texas throwing a legal tantrum, claiming that federal border patrol agents were playing backyard bullies by cutting their precious razor wire. Texas said, hey, that's our property you're messing with. Can you blame them? Nobody likes uninvited guests trampling over their turf. Surprisingly, Texas scored some points in the lower courts. They had judges nodding along saying, yeah, you've got a point there. But then the big guns stepped in, the Supreme Court. They swooped in on an emergency basis like superheroes coming to save the day. After some back and forth, the Supreme said, okay, Texas, we hear you, but let's not get carried away here. In a 5-4 vote, talk about a close call, they decided that federal agents could snip away at the wire if it helped people cross the border safely. Now, don't go thinking this is a permanent solution. It's more like a Band-Aid until they figure out the real deal. But it does raise some eyebrows about who calls the shots when it comes to border security. Are the feds the big bosses, or do the states get a say too?
My friends on the other side have done nothing with that. Over and over, I've asked for resources to step up action at the border. If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly.
This after the state seized control of the park to arrest migrants.
Let's put together the toughest, smartest, fairest border security bill in history. And by the way, I've worked with China and Mexico to slow the flow of fentanyl in the United States. As I speak, it's way down.
The crisis on the border intensifies. If it passes, it would become law, and the first time this country has had immigration reform.
1,000 apprehensions per day, which, by the way, holds a record for the most apprehensions in a month.
So there you have it. The Supreme Court giving the nod for some temporary wire removal. It's like a mini drama playing out at the border with legal battles and emergency interventions. Stay tuned, folks. Texas lawsuit. Buckle up for some Lone Star State drama. Texas isn't too happy about those federal border patrol agents, and they're making sure everyone knows it. How? Well, they've gone ahead and filed a lawsuit, claiming that those agents were trespassing and wrecking their property. Yep, you heard that right. Texas is throwing some serious legal punches. Texas, with its vast stretches of land, decided to beef up its border security with some razor wire. But then along comes the federal government, wielding their wire cutters like they own the place. Texas wasn't having any of that nonsense. They said, hold up, you can't just barge in here and start snipping away at our razor wire. That's our property, thank you very much. So they took Uncle Sam to court, arguing that the feds had overstepped their boundaries. Pun intended. They're standing firm saying, hey, we're in charge here. You can't just waltz in and do whatever you please. And you know what? Texas actually scored some wins in the lower courts. Judges were nodding along, agreeing that maybe the feds had gotten a bit too trigger-happy with their wire cutters. But then, just when things were heating up, the Supreme Court swooped in like the cavalry. They were all like, whoa, hold your horses. Let's take a closer look at this.
Early on and again in October to secure our borders. So let me be clear. My team has been at the table for weeks now with a bipartisan group of senators.
Now, this continues to be a years-long battle between the federal government and the state of Texas.
375 immigration judges to judge whether or not someone can come or not come and be fair about it. For funding that would add another 22,000 additional border agents.
To have forgotten that he is the governor of one of 50 states and not the president of a Republic of Texas.
Security at the border. The first bill I introduced.
And that's where our story takes a turn, a temporary one at least. The Supreme Court's decision to allow the temporary removal of the razor wire is like a plot twist in this legal saga. It's not the end of the story, but it sure adds another layer to the drama unfolding at the border. So, Texas is standing its ground, the feds fighting back, and the Supreme Court weighing in on who gets to call the shots. It's a legal showdown worthy of a Texas-sized showdown, and we're all just waiting to see how it plays out. Lower court rulings. Texas, always ready to throw down when it comes to defending its turf. And boy, did they score some wins in the legal arena before the Supreme Court swooped in. Texas, standing tall and proud, walks into court, ready to take on the federal government. And you know what? They actually came out on top not once, but twice. Those lower courts were like cheerleaders, rooting for Texas all the way. They listened to Texas's arguments and nodded along, agreeing that maybe, just maybe, the feds had gone a tad too far. Texas was all about property rights, waving the flag and saying, hey, that razor wire, that's ours. You can't just waltz in here and start cutting away without so much as a howdy. And you know what? Those lower courts nodded in agreement. They saw Texas's point and decided to give them a little boost, a little win to keep them going. It was like a Texas-sized pat on the back, boosting their confidence and showing them that maybe
A new detection equipment to stop fentanyl from coming into the country.
Now, the latest data shows that there are about 4,300 apprehensions per day.
Folks, we're making real progress. One of the most important issues we're facing. Hundreds of new immigration judges to make the judgments on the spot.
From Congress since the 90s. The future of the deal does have some speculating.
And a Supreme Court ruling stating those federal agents can cut razor wire.
just maybe, they could take on the big boys and win. But then, just when Texas was riding high on those victories, along came the Supreme Court. And let me tell you, it was like a plot twist in a Hollywood movie. The Supremes stepped in and said, hold your horses, folks, let's take a closer look at this. And just like that, the game changed. But those lower court victories, they'll go down in Texas history as a reminder that sometimes even the little guys can stand tall and win against the odds. It's like a David and Goliath story, with Texas playing the role of the scrappy underdog. So while the Supreme Court may have had the final say, those lower court victories will always be a badge of honor for Texas. They showed the world that when it comes to defending their property rights, they don't back down. Not now, not ever. Emergency basis. Now let's talk about the moment when the Supreme Court swooped in like superheroes to save the day. This wasn't your ordinary legal showdown. It was an emergency intervention with the fate of Texas and federal authorities hanging in the balance. Texas and the feds are locked in a heated legal battle over that razor wire along the border. Things are getting tense, and it's clear that someone needs to step in and break up the fight. Enter the Supreme Court, riding in on their white horses to restore order. But this wasn't just any Supreme Court decision. It was decided by a razor-thin margin of 5-4. Yep, talk about a nail-biter. With Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett joining forces with the liberal justices, the ruling was clear. Federal agents could go ahead and dismantle the wire under specific circumstances. Now, what were those circumstances? Well, it wasn't a free-for-all. The Supreme Court made it clear that federal agents could only break apart the wire if it helped facilitate border crossings. In other words, they had to have a darn good reason to start snipping away at Texas's precious property. But here's the kicker, this wasn't the end of the story. Nope, far from it. This was just a temporary fix, a band-aid on a much larger wound. The Supreme Court's intervention may have calmed the waters for now, but the legal battle between Texas and the feds is far from over. So there you have it, the Supreme Court riding in on their white horses to save the day. A 5-4 decision that tipped the scales in favor of federal authority, and a temporary solution to a much larger problem.
As the state continues to fly and bust
and remove about 30 miles of razor wire.
It includes an additional 1,300 border patrols. We need more agents on the border.
Lindsay, we're seeing a sharp decline in total apprehensions.
Justices ruling Monday that Border Patrol can cut.
The best one the nation's ever seen. It would finally provide the funding I requested.
Thousands of migrants to democratically run cities across the country.
1,600 asylum officers.
It's like something out of a legal thriller, with twists and turns at every corner. And you can bet that Texas and the feds aren't done duking it out just yet. Implications. The Supreme Court's decision isn't just a one-off ruling. It could shake up the whole federal-state dance when it comes to immigration law enforcement. Think of it like a ripple effect. One decision causing waves that could change the game for years to come. First off, the fact that the Supreme Court had to step in on an emergency basis tells you something's brewing. It's like they saw the fire and rushed in with the hoses before things got out of control. And with a 5-4 vote, you know it was a close call, like splitting hairs close. Now here's where it gets interesting. This ruling isn't some permanent stamp of approval, it's more like a let's deal with this for now kind of thing. But even temporary decisions can have long-term consequences, especially when it comes to who calls the shots on border security. So what are the implications? It raises questions about who holds the reins when it comes to immigration law enforcement. Are the feds still the big bosses, or are the states getting a bigger say in the matter? It's like a tug-of-war between federal power and state authority.
And over 100 cutting-edge inspection machines self-detect and stop fentanyl coming out of our system. To negotiate a deal, including border, because I believe we need significant policy changes.
Whether it would end or intensify Governor Abbott's efforts to protect the border here in Texas.
Only to rebound around the spring. In Texas, State Attorney General Ken Paxton denying federal Border Patrol agents.
2 months ago, my team began to work with a bipartisan group of senators.
And let's not forget about the broader picture. This ruling could set a precedent for future cases, shaping how federal and state governments navigate the murky waters of immigration law. It's like laying down the tracks for a whole new railroad. Once it's built, there's no turning back. So while this ruling may be temporary, its implications are anything but. It's like a pebble thrown into a pond, creating ripples that could reshape the landscape of immigration law enforcement for years to come. And as for who comes out on top, well, that's a story that's still being written. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.